joint use has many definitions and applications. At its most basic level, and why we're involved in it, is to open up schools, schoolyards and schools for physical activity for the community. There are communities throughout California where there's just nowhere to get physical activity, to get exercise.
I'm really thinking about physical activity spaces like playgrounds, parks, pools, and joint use tends to be an agreement, a formal agreement between two entities about how they're going to use, operate, maintain, care for a space so that the community or students can use that space and do activities on it.
It makes sense because we're not recreating, we're not investing, large amounts of capital to, say, establish a park or create a bike trail, that it's just really utilizing something that already exists in a way that previously hadn't been used.
Schools are funded through taxpayers, and so in a way they are public space. And so there isn't, for me in my mind, so much of a question of should they want to share it. But I think there is an obligation to share it. However, I do think that because they are responsible for, their first responsibility is educating and taking care of children while they're there in school hours, they do have a responsibility to protect and maintain their space.
There are many levels of legal protection for schools that actually protect them from being responsible for any kind of injury or tort that does happen after school or on the weekends.
When we started to look at the coverage at the local school level, all of the activities which we were proposing around joint use are covered by the existing liability coverage.
Clearly, having people move through a facility on 7 days a week rather than 5 is going to mean trash needs to be picked up and halls need to be mopped or pathways need to be swept. All of those things are true. But I think, again, we underestimate the ability of the folks who are using the facilities outside of the normal hours to pitch in and provide for that.
In my mind, what would happen is if community was allowed greater access to school space, that they would develop more ownership of that school space and want to preserve it.
No, we can't just shake on an agreement. There's a very high turnover, particularly in school districts, for instance, of personnel.
It also is always in the best interest of people to have a clear understanding of what their expectations are, what their obligations are, what their rights and their responsibilities are. And doing that in writing, doing that after having some negotiation back and forth so that people can see what their needs are and what their capacity is always the most important thing to do to get that clarity out on the table.
I think the benefits of joint use go far beyond just the idea of just opening up a space. There's something unexpected that happens that where in that space people come together, become less isolated, create closer connections to each other, and that in itself creates a safer and healthier environment. When you have more eyes on a place, more people who are invested in a place, that's just better for everyone, and it's the most sound use of the resource that there can possibly be.